Y'all, welcome back to my channel, Gina J from Around the Way. Today we're going to just touch on a very layered and touchy subject, and that is daddy issues. All right, my daddy issues and the inconsistency that shaped me really affected my life and affected how I entered into relationship and ultimately marriage, and then ultimately ended up divorce, because there were so many inconsistency in how I was loved or how I perceived my love from my father that really jacked me up emotionally and had me constantly yearning for a consistent type of attention and presence that I really didn't get. So this one's for the daughters who grew up feeling half loved and who had fathers that sometimes were there, but then oftentimes were not, and all of the confusion that it caused, right? So I didn't ask for my father wound, right? It was a circumstance of decisions that I would say my father made, and then even my mom made in some instances as well. And let's talk about the impact of the inconsistency, lack of validation, and what it really means to let go of the fantasy version of the relationship that we yearn for from our fathers. Today, I'm in a very different space. I am able to talk about this without feeling like this lack or this burning hurt that used to loom over my life at a certain point, and I'm happy to be here, but it took so much pain in order to get to this place, which I don't want y'all to go through. So let me set the record straight. I did not grow up fatherless, but I didn't grow up with a present father either, right? My dad was really in and out, and sometimes there and sometimes not. And the sometimes created a dangerous little hope in me every time he wasn't around, or that I felt like I needed some male guidance and he wasn't there. I think I held on tight to any moment he was around because I didn't know when the next one would come. And my father, you know, he has 5 daughters. It's 5 of us. I'm the youngest one, and there are 3 relationships in between that that form the 5 daughters that he has. And I think that the inability to stay consistent in everyone's life caused a rift in how we perceived his presence in all of our lives. And my sisters and I also have this thing with each other that we cannot get past when it comes to our father, because I have perceptions of how maybe they had his attention, and they have perceptions of how perhaps he had my attention, and it just has been a hot mess when it comes to how we refer to one another, respect one another, acknowledge one another, and see one another. I would say that no one had it harder than the other. I think we all have a sense of abandonment in some regard when it comes to his presence in our life, and I think maybe he didn't really understand how impactful that was going to be later. As you know, hindsight is always 20/20, but me looking back, I'm just like, dang, like if you would have just put a little bit of effort in making sure that we were united as a family, you know, as far as like my father's side of the family, and then also finding a way to have equal time amongst all of us, then there wouldn't be so much trauma and drama that was created in our father's side of the family, quite frankly. So what that inconsistency that my dad exhibited in my life, when I tell you, it created so much anxiety in me early on. And when I started dating, oh Lord, that need of validation, that need to understand and feel that I was loved, but that need to feel like I was validated and truly loved was more so a need for me to have some sort of emotional safety, because I don't think, growing up, I never felt emotionally safe. Never felt emotionally safe. In part because of what I shared in the video about, you know, my relationship with my mom, and then, you know, trailing into my relationship with my dad as well. In dating, how that affected me is that I accepted the bare minimum I mistook inconsistency for mystery. Like, like that inconsistency was like, oh wait, it was like a mystery. It was just like, oh, well, let's see what happens, or he'll come back around, or this hope, that whomever I was dating, and even in my marriage at one point, that they would be able to show me that they're going to show up for me, right? And it was weird, because as much as I knew how I grew up and what I didn't like when it came to my dad, like I never was able to correlate my dating relationship to my daddy issues until like I was in therapy, and then it kind of all made sense at one point. And I would say that when you crave your father's presence, you learn to romanticize any type of version of attention, whether it's inconsistent or not. And then you hold on to those moments that feel good and that are great, and then all the other moments where they weren't present or supportive or there for you emotionally, physically, whatever, you tuck that to the side, because that little moment that they was there, that 10 minutes versus that hour, means so much. So I think when I go back and I think about when I met my sisters as a teenager, I think things got more complicated when I met them, realizing that my dad had been there for them in ways that he wasn't for me. And I'm sure they feel the same way in the reverse, right? They may perceive it, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but they may perceive it that he was there for me in ways that he wasn't there for them. And it causes this rift that I mentioned earlier. And I won't lie, it messed me up completely. It made me wonder if I was enough. It made me wonder if he loved my mom. It made me wonder if we were good enough. It made me wonder, because I will say that tangibly, there were some things and some setups in place for my sisters that were not a part of my mother and I's setup, right? And I think also that my mom didn't enforce it, which didn't help either. But that also messed things up as to how I viewed my position in my life and in my father's life. So sibling situation aside, I think that I was really confronting the ache of comparison, right? Of comparing their life to my life and grieving what I didn't receive. And a lot of that grieving of what I perceived that I didn't receive was all up in here. Like some things were valid, but I will say some things were all up in here, because I made up this story and imagination of what I thought their life was in connection to what my life was with or without him. And it was really, really hard. Like, I think my dad is a very sentimental guy, and I really do believe that he truly loves his daughters. I really do believe that he has a yearning for family, but I think that the inability to accept a lot of the wrong decisions and the inability to be accountable for how we have experienced him is what causes, at least for me, the ability to have like a deep relationship. My dad and I are cool today, but it's a very surface relationship. Like, I wish it could be deeper. I wish it could go much further than where it is. But the fact of the matter is that if I could be honest, I don't trust myself with him. And not in a weird way at all, but that connection and that relaxation, that acceptance of who I am has never been a part of our dynamic. So for me to share some of the most intimate parts of my thoughts and being and even who I am doesn't feel natural for me. And it's really weird to say, because I adore my dad. Like, he's a fun person. He's very, very charismatic. He's a fun guy. He would absolutely, arrange a good time. But when it comes to depth that is needed in certain relationships, especially between mother and child or father and child, I don't know that there's an ability for that. Because while I don't want to tear my parents down for their shortcomings in raising me, I think the inability to just accept that things were pretty messed up and that I didn't get the care and attention that I needed at certain points in my life, the inability to acknowledge that does not allow us to get deep. And I will not go into some of the dynamics of him as a man, but I will say that unfortunately, the dynamic of my sisters, myself, the mothers, and there being no attempt to fix that in a way that is not set in division and separation has also really affected how we can be close. Like, I appreciate that both of my parents are in my son's life. I want my son to be able to have a good relationship with his grandparents, and I hope that the relationship that they are forming is much more safe. And well, from what I can tell, the relationship that my son is forming with his grandparents is way more emotionally safe than it was for me, which is a beautiful thing. But then at the same time, it's just like, you know, like I spoke about in my video with the relationship with my mom and healing the mother wound that I had, it's like my father's is a bit different. I remember just constantly, until reaching a point of just accepting what it is, hoping that he would change and hear me and feel me when I talk about what my experience was having him in and out, or learning of my sisters, you know, in my, you know, later in life, and understanding what that life was for him in whatever way. But there's nothing that comes of that. You know, I'm always met with his experience growing up and what he did or didn't have. And the conversation is never focused on my perception. It's always, it kind of turns on him with no acknowledgement of what I'm expressing. And I don't know that I need an apology from my dad at this point or anything like that. Like, it would solve nothing, but it would be nice for there to be some level of acknowledgement of the lack of, because fathers need to be there for their daughters. Daughters need their fathers. Children need their parents. I do believe that the father serves a purpose and the mother serves a purpose, and together they serve a purpose. And while it's intended for there to be a unit, most times it doesn't work out, but still it's a responsibility of those individuals to play the role that they are to play in the lives of these children. And oftentimes when there is a presence that is lacking by one parent or the other, albeit physical, emotional, mental, it breaks the foundation. And honestly, say that I absolutely married someone who mirrored a lot of the qualities in my dad that were not good, right? Because they felt so familiar. It was eerie to sit in a therapy session and for my therapist to be like, you know what you described right there? That's your father, not your ex. And I'm like, what? That's weird. She's like, hear me out. And she kind of explained the dynamic of how I would accept the bare minimum, I would accept inconsistency, I would accept the womanizing because it felt so familiar to what my home life was. And while I didn't want to replicate my home life, until I recognized or healed or worked through some of that, I was going to be in that rut of what home life was for me in my own life, because I was chasing behind that feeling and that familiarity, even though I knew it wasn't good for me, even though I didn't like how it felt. It was so bizarre once that correlation was made, because I was just like, damn it. And I was so angry with myself for not seeing that sooner. But you kind of got to go through that, right? That's the whole part of healing and journeys and things like this when it comes to your emotional growth. But I'm like, dang, right? And I wonder if Maybe I would have been able to reconcile some of my daddy issues early on in my life if that would have been different for me, or if I would have been able to, or if I would have had the guidance, the validation, the attention from my dad early on before I started dating, and gotten some lessons from him directly, maybe I would have chose differently. Who freaking knows? But the fact that I didn't have any of that guidance, then didn't really have that from my mom either, and was kind of out here winging it. Emotionally, I was so immature up until I started going to therapy, that I wasn't able to realize how much of my family trauma was affecting me. And a lot of it, not all of it, stemmed from daddy issues. A lot of it stemmed from my mother wounds. And then when I think about even in relationship, like I've had 2 ex-boyfriends of mine, or, well, my ex-husband and then an ex-boyfriend of mine, like, be like, oh, you got daddy issues. Like, just calling it out very plainly, but then using it to weaponize me or to manipulate me or hurt me, which was not cool either. So if you're navigating father wounds, I see you, and I would advise you, please, to make sure that you work through those daddy issues before you enter into any romantic relationship. Like, if you know that something exists there when it comes to males and how you perceive them and all of those things as a result of your relationship with your father, work through that as much as you can before entering a relationship, because either you're going to weaponize that new man in your life because of what your dad did to you, or you're going to fall into the same things that your father did to you or didn't do for you. Entering into this relationship with this man, your expectations might be misconstrued because you'll have some expectations from your dad that you're imposing on this man, and that's not fair. Like, there's just so many ways that can be broken down, and I've seen it in other ways in other people, and I'm just like, woof. On the flip side, though, I know women in my life that had amazing fathers and have and had amazing fathers, and their criteria for men are based on how their father treated them, or what they saw with their mother, or the way that they provided and were loved for. And that's a beautiful thing as well. So that can work in so many different ways. But I also think that a lot of our foundation stems from how we grew up, right? A lot of our foundation and how we maneuver life stems from our childhood. And as much as we are not our childhood today, a lot of times I feel like that little girl yearning for her dad, yearning for the attention, yearning for that when I think about certain situations in my life. And like I said, today I'm able to talk about the difficulties in the relationship with my father without shedding a tear, because honestly, like, when I tell you, like, over time, I just had to make that connection and that revelation to myself, like, yo, this thing that you want with your dad, this thing that you yearn for, you're not going to get it. Let it go. And then life just kind of took on what it took on, and I started to heal differently and accept certain things. And yeah, I'm not going to front, like, I wish that it could be more than what it is. I wish that there could be more depth. I wish that he was somebody that I thought of calling if I ran into a situation with a guy or was dating somebody and, needed some advice, but he's not. And likely not, because I have never been able to trust that whatever I share is a safe space, and it's going to be received, and it's going to be heard, and it's going to be treated with care. Because I never experienced that, right? Unfortunately, beyond the things that my dad did or didn't do with my relationship with him and how he regarded me in his life at certain points, also the relationship that I've seen with my sisters and, some of the dynamic there where favoritism plays a part in certain instances, and I'm favored one minute, and then the next one is favored the next minute, and then the next one. It's just so much that I'm just like, yeah, that level of trust it just won't make me feel comfortable at all, or that lack of trust won't make me feel comfortable. And it sucks, but it just is what it is. And I think that we also need to honor what things are for what they are instead of holding on to hope sometimes, because that holding on to hope will have us really abusing ourselves emotionally if we don't learn to accept things as they are, right? No matter how painful it is. So the whole daddy's girl dream, that daddy's girl dream is just a dream at this point. I had to stop hoping he'd become something that he's not or doesn't have the ability to be. Loving him a certain way, or vying for his attention a certain way, or validating myself to him, or you know, showing anything to him in a certain way is not going to get me the relationship what I want. So I had to stop performing even for him as a daughter, because I would do certain things and hope that he would see me, and it would always end up in me being disappointed. So I had to let that go. Forgiving him doesn't mean that I don't feel the gaps in between. Like, those gaps are there. Every now and again they surface them, and they might trigger me, but not to the extent where it's affecting my life today in a way that it was like in my early 20s, right? Or anything like that. Like, in my 20s, like, oh my God, it was so bad that I was always boohoo crying, upset, just rah, rah, rah about this relationship with my dad and then my sisters and all the things. And I had to let that go. Like, no. So if you're navigating father wounds, I see you. It's okay to mourn what you did not get. And it's okay to love someone and set boundaries and allow for this type of closeness that you can muster. Like, whatever you can manage in your life and what that closeness looks like for you, it's okay to let that be that. And that's it. That's all. Y'all, healing is not about rewriting the past, as we know. Like, it's about accepting the truth and still choosing yourself as you move forward. All right? Well, if this resonated with you, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Again, you will see me here next week. And also, if you're interested, you can find me in all the social handles I've shared above. And I will catch you the next time. All right? Bye!